I'm honored to have been invited to speak at this anniversary dinner and award ceremony in honor of the members of the Nigerian Law School class of 1989. I must say that only the most altruistic and the most introspective ever think in terms of alumni associations, because it's about giving back. So I commend your class for your thoughtfulness. Your thoughtfulness and generosity, especially for the donation of the much-needed e-portal that was donated to the law school. As for the matter of whether your class is the best, that's Emeka Nwajiuba, has pointed out that marrying from this class, because I married from this class, I am stopped from contesting this fact. I will do so. I will accept my lot and accept that the matter of owing the class a bride price is, as you know, after 30 years, statute barred. After 30 years. I congratulate all the award recipients, and I must say that the awards are certainly well deserved. Emeka, that's Nwajiuba, was trying to persuade me that this class has the largest number of high court judges and professors and everything. Well, we are still looking into the matter, you know. We are looking into the matter. I pointed out that my class, which is a class of 1979, was, we were only barely 300. I said we were barely 300. So in terms of proportion, I think you will see that. And I suspect that your class was nearly 3,000. But then, again, I must congratulate you, and especially the award recipients. And I know that practically everyone here is deserving of the awards that have just been given out. Senator Godswill Akpabio, that is the Honorable Minister for Niger Delta, while commenting on a memo on justice policy, I believe it was, at the Federal Executive Council meeting, said, and I quote him, "You know, I've been a lawyer for about 33 years or so." And before I could finish, all across the room, people just said, stop that, what kind of lawyer are you? When did you, how long did you, when did you practice? You know. And I'm continuously fascinated by the idea that many of us qualify as lawyers, yet we don't practice. And for some reason, those who don't practice, that is to say, who don't go to court or are in chambers or in one or the other, you know, the active practice of the law, are regarded almost as non-lawyers. My wife, for example, has been qualified for 30 years. And the day she qualified, which was incidentally the day that we got engaged to be married, yes, exactly, the day the law school results were announced, pointed out to me that she had absolutely no intention of practicing law in any shape or form, you know, and that she was quite happy to have gone to law school. As a matter of fact, eventually I used her wig because, of course, as you know, there's no real difference between that of the male or female. But does practice in court or in solicitors' chambers, does that necessarily mean that one is not using one's profession properly? I think the starting point is to remember that to whom much is given, much is expected, or much is desired. Being a lawyer puts you on it makes you an elite of sorts, and you have an elite status, without a doubt. As of 2019, Nigeria would have just under 100,000 lawyers, living and dead. Just under $100,000. And as of this, 100,000 lawyers. And as of this year, we have living and dead 545 senior advocates of Nigeria. All of that, and when you add the numbers together, it's very obvious that ours is an elite profession. And those of us who have had the privilege of studying law represent a most tiny fraction of the educated elite of Nigeria, not to mention the rest of the country, of the educated elite of Nigeria, who represent even a very, very tiny fraction. So there's no question that we belong to an elite group, a group of people schooled in the systematic understanding of the philosophy and principles of law and justice. That is not a slight matter at all. And you do not have to remember any of your cases or sections of the law. Not even practicing lawyers always do anyway. What is important is that you have an understanding of core principles, the rule of law, fundamental rights, an important part of which is socioeconomic rights, the right to education, food, shelter, healthcare, etc. And then, of course, minor matters like formation of contracts, crime, constitutional laws, etc. And you know where to find the law if you need to. So whether you practice law or not, you have a tremendous responsibility as one of the extremely few persons who have been exposed to the discipline of the study of law and justice. In fact, those who do not practice but have a keen awareness of the importance of justice, especially socioeconomic rights of people, are more likely to impact our world more profoundly. When in 1999, I was approached by Governor Bola Tinubu then to become Attorney General of Lagos State, I was a law teacher and a scholar. Of course, I practiced. I had, I was in court here, a few times, not very often, although I did a fair amount of practice. But I was more devoted to scholarship and teaching. And I was involved also in civil society. Many criticized him at the time for appointing a professor rather than a well-known senior advocate of Nigeria. I was not, of course, a senior advocate at the time. But I say with all humility that he might have been proved right, because I suspect that because I was involved in civil society and being a professor of law, I had a keener sense of what was required to revamp our justice system. I knew that we had to transform our Ministry of Justice from just a Ministry of Law and Order to one of justice, especially after so many years of military rule. So we introduced the Citizens' Rights Department, the Office of the Public Defender, the Citizens Mediation Center. And we tried to change the archaic rules of procedure, of civil procedure, boldly. And we're able to do so, and we're able to do so boldly because we were not necessarily invested in it. I remember that while we were trying to change the civil procedure rules and introduce all of the front loading and all of those various things, one of the most senior lawyers in Nigeria engaged me in a discussion for almost 2 hours, trying to persuade me that there was no need to review the rules at all. At the end of the day, I discovered that his major problem was that you'd have to cope with new sections here and new sections there, new orders here, new rules there. But those of us who are not necessarily invested in that way found it much easier to be able to say, this requires a change. Today, many of those who move the frontiers of rights and justice in our society are lawyers who never entered the courtrooms. When we were about to appoint justices in Lagos, I made a point of saying that I wanted us to appoint many who are from the universities, many who are not necessarily practicing law, because one of the best judges we had at the time, Justice Oguntade, and many of us know Justice Oguntade, who later went on to the Supreme Court, was at the time of his appointment a furniture dealer. He was actually running a furniture business when he was appointed a judge. And he became easily one of the best judges in the state, and then went on to the Supreme Court. So the truth of the matter is that even those of us who do not practice law have an incredible responsibility, because for the mere fact that you've been exposed to a study of the law, we really do have a big role to play in making a difference in the lives of so many. My wife, for example, who, as I said, never wanted to practice law and never practiced law, and I think that I can proudly say that I put her under no pressure whatsoever. I think I had enough law for all of us, for practically all of us. But she has trained well over 15,000 young men and women today in so many skills. And she's been doing so since we pastored the church in 1996, and she's been doing so since 1996. And she's done, worked extensively with women who have been abused, domestic abuse, sexual violence, and all that, and has been running 2 shelters since 2001. To date, she's been running 2 different shelters for women who have been abused. Now, I mentioned this to point out that the mere fact that you don't practice law does not mean that you should not have a social conscience, a commitment to social justice. As a matter of fact, your commitment to social justice should be even more so, when you practice law. But if you do not practice law, especially in a society such as ours, where there's so much misery and poverty, social justice is more important than the technistic justice which we mete out in the courts. Who better to advocate and create institutions for social justice than trained lawyers? We don't need to be court-going lawyers to be strong lobbyists for judicial reform. How can it take 10 years today? How can it take 10 years to decide a case? And that is even sometimes considered reasonable these days. How? Why should it take 10 years to decide a case? We should be the strongest lobbyists for reviewing the length of time it takes to decide cases. We've already seen from the election petition cases that it is possible to decide a case in 180 days, no matter how important the case is. Even the presidential elections was decided in under 180 days. When I was in the Osun State case, when Raoul Faregbeshola was contesting the elections there, it took us 3.5 years to get him back his mandate, 3.5 years. But now, 180 days, and you can actually decide it. So there's a good reason for us, I think, that those of us who are either practicing or not practicing, I think there's good reason for us to insist on judicial reform and to press for judicial reform. Because if we don't, very soon our profession may become quite irrelevant. Today, loads of people say that, why should I bother to go to court? As a matter of fact, people threaten you with courts because they know that it will take forever and a day. So I think it is important for us, those of us who practice and those who do not, especially those who do not practice, we can become strong lobbyists, very strong lobbyists for judicial reform. Men and women trained in the law generally have a much greater duty than most other people to find practical means of fulfilling the constitutional promises of equality before the law, of social justice. And you have the ability to do so whether you're in active practice or not. I want to just again thank you all very much for the honor of being here. And to say that it's never too late to do a good thing. We of the 1979 set must also immediately convene our class, and I assure you that it will be much grander than this one. Thank you all very much. God bless you.